It seems to be a pretty commonly held belief that the Giants' offense has been bad this season, but have they really? What do the numbers have to say about it? We'll get into it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting Locked On Giants for over 5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And coming up on today's show, as I said yesterday, we're going to be getting into more of your mailbag questions. Thanks again to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter. Just a little housekeeping note, I did for the first time in a while look at YouTube comments yesterday, and there was a lot of asking about why don't I take mailbag questions from YouTube? Why don't you have a Twitter account? I'm sorry, that's rude of me to say, but it is much easier for me if it's all in one place. I could consider maybe having a personal or like a Locked On kind of themed email address where you could send in questions if you don't have a Twitter account. So I got your loud and clear message received. I will think of something there. First question, though, comes from Wilhelm von Stupid, who says, the very likable Eric Engel, the host of the Giants Locked On Giants postcast, says the Giants have a bad offense, but I don't think they are bad. I think they are probably close to average. What's the average batting average with runners in scoring position for a team? What's the average amount of runs scored? And so, those are not typically the metrics that I look at to evaluate an offense. If you are at all familiar with the show, you know that I'm always talking about weighted runs created plus, which is just an all-encompassing offensive metric. And in fact, yes, the Giants are actually slightly above average by this far more robust number than most of what you're going to find out there. But I'll just go through average on base slugging and then get to those specific metrics you asked about. So this is what I say. If I were to just tell you, which I'm going to, that the Giants team batting average is 244, I think the immediate reaction would be, that's terrible. The Giants stink. They, send them all to the moon. They stink. Send them to the sun. Well, guess what? That's the 12th highest in Major League Baseball, 244. And the league average is 241. And so they're above average in batting average. So 241 is normal in today's day and age. And I say this, I've been doing this show for 5 years, over 5 years, like I said, and we just have to adapt to the reality that these days, that is what baseball looks like, is, a batting average of 240 is normal. And so to expect, 300 is what's good. The best team in baseball in batting average is at 262. That's the best in baseball. So we need to reset expectations on what is good in this category, in my opinion. So the Giants on base percentage is 314, which to me, I have to think about this because that seems kind of low to me, but it's 11th highest in baseball, and the league average is 311. So the Giants 3, points there above Major League average. So the league average slugging, let me rephrase that. The Giants slugging percentage is 379. And the league average there, and by the way, that ranks 17th. So if there's one criticism, it is power. And the league average there is 388, and the Giants are at 379. And so Anyway, I could talk about isolated power. I could get into a lot of other stuff, but I do want to go. I'm going to have to venture off of Fangraphs and go to Baseball because that's where you're going to find these numbers because they're not exactly predictive, and so I don't look at them all the time. Like runners in scoring position numbers, very important when you're talking about what's your record, but at the same time, it's not something that year to year is duplicated normally. It's just kind of a random thing. Like, how do you perform in those situations? Some years you might do well, some years you don't do well. It's just not very predictive. And so for the Giants, I've got to kind of look this up on the fly. Well, first of all, let's look at runs scored per game. So the league average there is 4.33 runs per game, and the Giants are just a little bit below that at 4.25. And so you might wonder, how does a number like weighted runs created plus say the Giants are just a little bit above average, and then by runs scored per game they're a little bit below average? The answer to that is, first of all, that the weighted runs created plus number is like context neutral, and so you could kind of have some bad luck or good luck, and it doesn't really take that into account. It's not about actual runs scored. It's kind of more about runs runs created, like based on the likelihood of runs being created based on the different offensive outcomes. But also, more importantly, I think more easy to understand here is they play in a tough place to hit, and so at Oracle Park, and so it's like the Rockies. The Rockies are often not now. The Rockies are just behind the Giants. Well, not just behind them, but they're two teams below the Giants at 4.09 runs per game. But that's much worse than it looks because they should be at the top, like they should be near the top, but they're actually in the bottom half significantly, and that means they're extra bad because they play half their games at Coors Field. All right, and so I actually found on Fangraphs, I didn't know they even had this, but you can see the team numbers with runners in scoring position. I always am talking about, before I even looked at this, I had no idea where the Giants ranked. I was going into this completely blind, and they are bottom 5. Their team weighted runs created plus with runners in scoring position is 90, so about 10% below average offense when they've got these runners in scoring position. But I'm always saying that scoring position is, I don't consider second base scoring position and like first base not. I don't consider someone in the batter's box not in scoring position. So the idea behind the scoring position is like a single will score a run, maybe. But to me, like if you're on first and then somebody hits a double and you score, like how is that not scoring position? If you're anywhere on the bases, or just there's nobody on base and you hit a homer, then you were in scoring position, quote unquote. So I just do not care for that number, but it is worth pointing out that they are bottom 5 because the question was asked. And then in terms of just average with runners in scoring position, Giants are 23rd at 237. And the league average in this category is 253 with a 108 weighted runs created plus. So it makes sense when there's guys on base, hitters do better generally than when the bases are empty because there's more pressure on the pitchers to like come into the strike zone essentially. So the Giants batting average on balls in play strikes me as very low here at 270. That is 24th, and the league average there is 295. So that's kind of, a sustainability luck indicator. Their strikeout rate is only it's not very high, so they're not striking out a lot in those situations, but they have the 10th lowest strikeout rate, but they're just simply not like hitting the ball well is what it would seem to me. Although they could have been unlucky, it doesn't give me expected numbers here. But yeah, they haven't done great with runners in quote scoring position, but so that could partially explain the runs per game being slightly below average. But again, we're talking slightly below average, even though we're looking at Jorge Soler having a really down year. We're looking at Jung-Hoo Lee being out for the season, injuries galore up and down the roster, and yet still mediocre, I think is the right way to put it. Not bad, but mediocre. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, more questions and answers, including what are going to be the corresponding moves to activate Nick Ahmed and LaMonte Jr. And we found out one of the answers to this today with Nick Ahmed actually being activated. So we'll get into that and more in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Giants, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collections season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description below. All right, as promised, we are going to get to more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we are going to be breaking down this 3-game series against the Angels. It is a real opportunity for the Giants. You know, if you can win the series and perhaps sweep the series. If you win the series, you're at 500. If you win 2 out of 3, I should say. And if you sweep, you're 2 games over, or you're 1 game over 500, actually, I should say. No, 2. They would be 2 because they're 1 under now. And yeah, it's funny how it works that way. It's impossible for them to leave the series 1 game over 500. They're at 500 or 2 above or 2 below. Or wait. Don't let me start thinking about if they lose the series, because then they could be 2 below, or they could, if they got swept, they would be 4 below. So it's crazy. -4, -2 plus forget it, for 0 and then +2. It is what it is, guys. Anyway, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A reminder, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So, the next question comes from Bay Area Champ, who says, corresponding moves once Nick Ahmed and LaMonte Jr. can come back. And so Nick Ahmed's coming back tonight. The Giants are definitely facing a lefty. It's Tyler Anderson, the former Giant, who has a really nice ERA of 2.63, but peripheral numbers are all way higher. So he's due for some regression to the mean here and for some runs to be allowed against him, is kind of how I see it when I look at these numbers for him. So maybe that starts tonight, and we saw some moves. You know, the Giants, and in fact, I was thinking of this yesterday and didn't say it, but you know, the question was asked, like, will Brett Wisely stick on the roster when Nick Ahmed returns? And I was like, yes, I think so. But in my head, I can't remember if I actually said it, but like, I thought it was more likely that they would option Casey Schmidt than Brett Wisely to get Nick Ahmed back on the roster, and that's exactly what they did. So they optioned Casey Schmidt, they activated Nick Ahmed, they also activated Marco Luciano from the injured list and optioned him. So Luciano goes back to AAA. Nick Ahmed rejoins the active roster, and he goes right into the lineup tonight facing a left-handed pitcher. So no Brett Wisely in the lineup tonight, but I think the team is just generally stronger when you've got Nick Ahmed out there on defense against a left-handed pitcher with Brett Wisely able to come off the bench. And so it is a little bit of a platoon situation for now. If Nick Ahmed just really, really struggles with the bat, he is hitting ninth. He definitely needs to continue to play good defense in order to hold his spot on the roster. And there's far more right-handed pitchers than there are left-handed pitchers in the game. And so Brett Wisely will get a lot of playing time. And he wasn't sent down. And so, he's going to pinch hit probably tonight. He's going to start when there's a righty on the mound. And so I wouldn't stress too much about it. I don't think like the 20 or so games that he's played and done well in warrant, okay, yeah, he shouldn't be platooned. He should be in there every day. Although I will point out his at-bats, even against lefties, he's looked like he can handle that too. But at the same time, Nick Ahmed provides some value here as a really good defender, and I thought he was helping them when he was on the team to start the season. He's been out quite a while, but he is back, so we'll see how that plays out. So that the corresponding move it was answered for you there. You probably already saw that, so maybe you didn't need me to answer it, but I wanted to comment on it. And then in regards to LaMonte Wade Jr., so looking at the current roster, the Giants have at first base, so at first base, Wilmer Flores is playing. Obvious answer here. Trenton Brooks. Trenton Brooks is the obvious kind of answer. The left-handed Trenton Brooks, who's been playing first base when he's played, and he's only played in 7 games. I'm intrigued by Trenton Brooks, but I think that's just the obvious corresponding move. And the latest on LaMonte Wade Jr., I think the Giants put out a medical update that I didn't see, and so I'm just going to read. Yeah, so he said on Wednesday, a couple days ago, that he's pushing hard to return from the 10-day injured list for the Giants' matchup with the Cardinals on June 20th at Rookwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama, reported Andrew Baggerly of The Athletic. And so that makes me nervous, to just I get wanting to come back for that, but you gotta be careful. You don't want to push it just to make it into a game that you really want to make it into for personal, meaningful reasons. I get it. I totally get it. But at the same time, you got to be careful. And so, that we're still at least a week away, but I would venture to guess that probably doesn't end up happening and that he isn't ready to go and that it would be a big bummer for him. But that would be Trenton Brooks would be the kind of obvious corresponding move there. So the next question comes from Seth, who says, when does Hayden Birdsong debut, and does Hunter Bishop get up this year? So Hunter Bishop, definitely a fascinating guy to keep an eye on, as he was recently promoted to AAA, as was Grant McCray, I believe. I need to double check on that. I think that came out in just the last couple of days. So these guys getting closer. It's exciting. These are, compelling players. And in AAA, Hunter Bishop doing pretty well. Hitting 302, 391 on base, 479 slugging, a 117 weighted runs created plus. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of Patrick Bailey. This was the Giants' first round pick from whatever year it was. There's a bug flying in my face. Excuse me if you're watching on YouTube. But Hunter Bishop was the first round pick of this new regime. They're not new anymore, but they were new at the time, the 2019 draft. And it's been just tons of injuries for him. But this year he's been healthy. He's played in 51 games between AA and AAA, and he's generally hit pretty well. And so I guess I'll answer that question second, because the first part of the question was, when does Hayden Birdsong debut? And so Hayden Birdsong, when was he drafted? He was drafted in the 6th round of the 2022 draft. So that looks like a total steal. The ETA on Fangraph says 2026, and I just don't buy that at all, given that he's in AA and dealing. And so I would say the ETA is either 2024 or 2025. and could definitely be this year. I mean, he's just, there's really not much I can point to that he's doing that wouldn't warrant a promotion at this point to at least AAA. And sometimes you could just kind of skip over AAA if you're having this kind of performance. So what I'm seeing, he spent he made 8 starts in AA last year, and kind of the numbers are pretty similar, except this year he's got a much higher ground ball rate. And when I say the numbers, I'm looking at strikeout rate, walk rate, and all that. So he's striking out over 30% of batters. He is walking about 10% of batters, so that's a little bit high. Ground ball rate is up to a normal kind of league average type level. And he's got a 2.05 ERA in AA in 48 and a third innings. Peripherals, 365, fielding independent pitching, just doing really well. So when does he get called up? I think, if there's an injury or two more in the rotation, he's definitely a candidate to just get called up and added to the roster, as is, I think, Carson Wisenhunt. So I don't know when exactly, but he's on the track. I mean, he could definitely be seen this year, in my opinion, based on, he's due for a promotion of some kind based on this performance. I don't see any reason he shouldn't be promoted. They're probably just waiting on a need for him, and maybe there's no room in the AAA rotation right now. And I don't know. I think a AAA promotion could be fast coming for Hayden Birdsong. And then, so I'll answer the rest of the question about Hunter Bishop and more, and get to more mailbag questions in just a minute about the Giants getting to 500 and perhaps staying over it. We'll get into all of that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Game Time. I love going to games, baseball games during the summertime, and really all year long. I went to the Padres and Dodgers games to open up the season. I went to, I've been to Boston. I went to Fenway Park this season. I went to Denver to see the Giants play the Rockies, and Game Time is my go-to for buying tickets, and for numerous reasons. And my two favorites are panoramic views of what your seat is going to look like. Some of these ballparks, Fenway was the only one, but I've never been there, and so I did not know what does the view look like from the seat. And it's got some weird funky levels, and so it was a game changer to have panoramic views from every seat that was being offered. And then also the lowest price guarantee, because frankly, I don't know when to buy the ticket, early, late, somewhere in the middle. But with Game Time, with the lowest price guarantee, the Game Time guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will just credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday, breaking down this 3-game series between the Giants and the Angels. This is a series you should win if you're the Giants on paper, and get greedy. Try to sweep a series here, and one of the mailbag questions we're about to get to is kind of about the 500 mark and just getting to it and exceeding it, and stop being in limbo, which it seems like they've been in perpetually for ever since they won 107 games. And then even the season prior to that, it's just like 500 limbo is where the Giants have lived, and it's kind of time to get past that. So a reminder that also after pretty much every Giants game, Eric Engel, who was mentioned earlier, does a great job doing Locked On Giants postcast, where you can find live on YouTube on Locked On Sports San Francisco, and you can join there for instant reactions and get in on the commentary and write in the chat and engagement and interaction on all that stuff. And it also shows up on the normal Locked On Giants podcast feed everywhere but the YouTube channel, because it has its own YouTube channel. So just wanted to give a reminder about that. So The second part of the question here from Seth, does Hunter Bishop get up this year? I'd kind of say unlikely, but definitely possible. I mean, if he just tears it up, he's in AAA, and it would probably require some injury situations happening. They've got Michael Conforto, they've got Mike Yastrzemski, they've got Austin Slater, they've got Elliot Ramos, they have Luis Matos in the minor leagues, they've got other guys in the minor leagues. So Hunter Bishop, I'm not sure, is like, I think he's really got to prove himself and just, spend some time there, be healthy, and really tear the cover off the ball to be under consideration to get called up this year. But at the same time, if they believe in him a lot, like we've seen it with certain guys, it's not necessarily someone you would expect to get an aggressive call up. Like Patrick Bailey, that's kind of how it was. I mentioned that a minute ago, but and then look at what he's become, and so they kind of have more info than we do and when it comes to evaluating these guys. And I think they're better than most of us at determining who's going to be successful and who's not. And by the way, Grant McCray, yes, indeed in AAA now, and he might be ahead of Hunter Bishop on the depth chart there. I'm not entirely sure, but doing well so far in a small sample in AAA, walking as often as he strikes out, about 19% of the time, which is really impressive. And he is 23 years old and third round pick in 2019. So Bishop was a first round pick in 2019, 10th overall pick. So anyway, that's my answer to those questions. Does Bishop get up this year? I don't think so, but definitely possible given that he's in AAA for sure. And he's not on the 40-man, and that's a huge factor. Guys like Matos are on the 40-man, and so that makes it much easier to call them up because you don't have to make a corresponding 40-man move to get them onto the 40-man roster. They're already there. So next question comes from Big Guy, who says, when will the Giants get and stay above 500? Is it time for a new closer? So that's a totally separate question. I'm just going to say no for Camilo Doval. I've talked about Camilo Doval and his struggles. If you want to look back like 4 or 5 episodes ago, we did get into the topic about, it was definitely in the title. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on that, check that out. But since then, he's put together some solid outings, including the last game against the Astros. I'm pretty sure it was just a kind of stress-free save there for Camilo Doval. And so he's just got to throw more strikes. I think that's the one thing, is just throw more strikes and he'll be fine. But when will the Giants get and stay above 500? I'll predict that they get there tonight, even though it's like, a little bit sketchy when Tyler Anderson comes in. He does have a 2.63 ERA, even though I think that it looks unsustainable, like totally unsustainable. But the Giants are going with Spencer Howard, and his 2.03 ERA looks unsustainable, although, it's more like just a small sample, but he's also obviously not, their first line of defense when it comes to pitching. And so there's no guarantee that things are going to go well for Spencer Howard, who does have a career 6.66 ERA in the major leagues. But this year, in 13 and a third innings, it's at 2.03 with peripherals in kind of the mid threes. So, but it's the Angels. I think the Giants have just clearly a better roster than the Angels, with no Mike Trout, no Shohei Ohtani. Trout is injured. Ohtani is obviously on the Dodgers. But so they're one game under 500. I say they win tonight and get to 500. And then if you win this series, you're over 500. And then can they stay there? That would be the key question. And so obviously I don't have the answer to this question. So let's see. I mean, it depends on who do they play afterwards. So I would never say with confidence in any series with any team. I can say, oh, you should win this series, but I'll never say they will. It's not that easy to do. But if they do win the series, the Giants would be one game over 500, and then they go out on the road and they play the Cubs and the Cardinals. So I feel like they've historically had a tough time at Wrigley Field. So I'm not confident in a series win there. But it obviously could happen. Then they've got the Rickwood Field game in Birmingham, and then 2 more in St. Louis against the Cardinals, and then they come home and play the Cubs for 4, and then the Dodgers for 3, and then they're at Atlanta, at the Guardians. Those are 2 pretty good teams, and then at home against the Blue Jays and Twins, 2 other competitive teams. So I don't know. I don't see them necessarily breaking through and getting way over 500 before the All-Star break. Maybe if you can just hover around 500 and get to the All-Star break, and then you play the Rockies, you do then play the Dodgers, but then it's after that 4 games in LA. Yikes. After that, it's 4 games at home against the Rockies. You have the A's coming into town, the Reds, the Nationals, the Tigers, the Braves for 4, but it's at home, and then the A's again, the White Sox. So there's like a soft pocket there, and then mixed in a couple series later, you get the Marlins. So there's like maybe that's when the Giants make their move, is kind of in August, late July, after the All-Star break, after the Dodgers series, and in August. Maybe that's where you can play really well and pull away and get away from that 500 mark that is just, they cannot seem to break clear of it. Last year for a long time they were like about 10 games over, but then they couldn't improve upon that, and then they fell back down to below 500 with a horrible September. So we'll see, but I'll say they kind of stay there ish. Hopefully they're able to break through it, but they do have a soft pocket of the schedule at some point, and that'll be a moment to take advantage and hopefully pull away from the competition. Worth noting that they're right there in the mix, even though they're 1 game below 500 for a playoff spot with all the parity in the National League. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every day is on Monday, of course, breaking down this series against the Angels. Can they do what they should do and win the series? That's the question I have. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Reminder, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. Go Giants. You are now Locked On Giants.